team is capable, and yet they still won't move without you. That's not a them problem. But before we get into it, I want to say happy July. If you're listening to this in July, if you're listening to this, at a later date, who knows what month it is. But here we are in July 2026, and I'm just really excited about where we're going. So I was planning the podcast for this month, and I was planning the theme, and this one's been sitting with me for a little while. It's going to be the theme. We're going to stick with this theme. It's going to sound different every week. However, it's going to kind of build on each other. So you're going to want to come back and listen to all of them. But the theme for July is the signal you're sending. And we're going to just live. We're going to go deep for a little bit. And this isn't a fix your delegation series. It's something that's underneath that. I don't know how many times I've heard leaders I just need to get better at delegating, or I just need to communicate better. The problem is actually not delegation or what you think the communication may be. It's something underneath that. So if you've ever wondered why the same thing keeps happening on your team, no matter what you say, that's what this series is all about. But before we get into it, if you're already feeling this one in your chest, if you're already realizing that you might be sending signals, you might be saying something and doing something that's different, then the Aligned Leadership Audit is the real conversation. 45 minutes, just you and I. The link is in the show notes, but it's tammymariecoaching.com/call. And let's get into the why your team keeps reading you instead of listening to you. Let's find that gap and then let's fix it. All right, let's get into the episode. So here's what no one tells you when you get promoted. The moment that you step into that room, you stop being heard and you start being watched. Every single day, your team is reading you, not your words. And whatever they're reading, they're already acting on that. So your words and your behavior are running two different conversations, and your team only believes one of them. I would say maybe not believes one of them, but your team takes its actions from one of them. And this is not new. This whole concept here is, how many times have we said to our partner, to our spouse, to our friends, our team, or even our kids? We say it in a little tongue-in-cheek because it's typically when we are doing something and saying something completely different. But when's the last time you said, do what I say and not what I do? I know I've said that to my kids before, at least once. I've said it to my team. Maybe not that exact statement, but close. And here's what it looks like in real life. You say, I trust you. And then you rewrite their work before it goes out the door. You say, take ownership. But then you're in every decision before it's final. And you say, bring me. And then you give them the answer before they even finish the sentence. So that gap between what you say and what you do isn't a contradiction to you. It's information to them. So they're not confused. They're actually really accurate. They've just learned which version of you to trust, and it isn't the spoken one. Really, the invisible through line is watch me, not what I say. Even though we will say, do what I say, not what I do. So because most leadership training, they fix the behavior and then expect it to hold. But then it doesn't. It can't. Behaviors aren't where this starts. There's a sequence underneath it, and starting in the wrong place is the whole reason the fix doesn't last. Now, I have a note in my outline here. I see it in bold letters to not go on a tangent here because I know my tendencies. But this concept, this concept does deserve its own podcast. So I will do a whole episode on just this framework, this process that we're talking about. But because I wanted to give you a little bit more context. So what I want you to think about this is, think of a circle with 4 layers. The result being the 4th layer, the outer layer. And so behavior, which we typically think is the center of everything, it's actually layer number 3, not layer number 1. So starting with behavior won't make the lasting change. And it won't give you the why behind the why, which is why we try to fix the behavior and then expect it to hold, and it doesn't. All right, so I'll leave you with that. So it gives you kind of frames this a little bit. But when we start with behavior, we're missing 2 layers that that give you more insight, give you the why, and then also, and we'll talk about this, kind of this is thread throughout the next couple of episodes, but we will talk about what does change it. So, off the tangent, I think I did pretty good staying on topic there and not going too squirrel, but your team isn't failing to decide. They're learning every single day whether or not you meant to teach them. The training doesn't build the culture, repetition does. The organization is always in session. It just doesn't look like a classroom. So I want you to ask yourself here, what lesson have I accidentally taught this year? Whether it's, or you can also, use this because we all have someone we answer to. We're trained by the way they ask their questions or the information they want. How have you been taught by your stakeholders this year? And I wanted to kind of break this down a little bit because I worked with this owner and he was in the medical industry, brilliant at what he did. Like he has been in business for over 20 years. He's got a great team. He built the team around him. If it's somebody he wanted to work with, that's how he built the team. And yet every decision still came back to him even 20 years later. Not because his team couldn't handle it. That's one thing he made very clear at the beginning. Even during our intake, when we were just talking about whether to work together or not, he talked about how capable his team was and how he hired leaders. But somewhere along the way, without ever deciding to, he's built a system that needed him at the center. So every time he tried to take some time off, or every time he wanted to go away for vacation, or he wanted to try, going and working on different goals for the organization, he still kept getting pulled back into the day-to-day ops. So this system, it needed him at the center. And he thought it was a them problem. He thought it was a team problem. He thought there was something that we needed to fix in behaviors, but really it wasn't a team problem. It was an architecture problem. And the crazy thing is that he built it. So, and this is true for every leader who's ever said, I don't know why they keep bringing this to me. It's not a them problem. It was never a them problem. And let me caveat here, if they're not capable. But I'm not talking about those who are not capable. I'm talking about those who have another layer, have another level, who are capable of more than they are doing. But you're stuck in this kind of rut, this pattern that keeps you at the same momentum, the same results level. But it was never a them problem. It's a signal problem. And signal problems are solvable the moment you see them. That's one reason why I love doing this work, because the ahas don't happen 6 months from now. The ahas start the moment we start to look at really what's going on. Typically in the first session, we already start to make changes, because when we see the pattern, when we see the signal, then we get to decide in that moment whether we keep them or not, if we're going to change them or not, or if they're working or not. And a lot of them, they used to work, but not anymore. They used to serve you, but now they're a hindrance. So, which we're going to go into that in a couple of episodes too, when a strength becomes your bottleneck. So a couple episodes from now, I'm excited about that one. But let's talk, let's pull you forward a little bit. Let's picture the version of you where your team reads something different. Not because you worked harder at communicating. We can all learn to communicate better and more effectively, but I'm not talking about communication skills. I'm really talking about that invisible layer that some people say energy. I'm not a woo person, but I do know that we're sending off these invisible signals that our nonverbal communication is louder than our verbal communication. So it's because the what you're sending lines up with what you're saying. So that's the picture that I want you to start envisioning for your team, because your culture stops being something you manage in this moment and starts being something that you set on purpose. And we can talk about culture, we talk about decision making, there's so many areas we can go here, but the moment you stop to manage something and you start to intentionally decide on it, because you already know how to do this. You've been doing this your whole career without naming it. Every signal you've ever sent, You sent because something underneath you was driving it. And that part is not broken. It's just never been named out loud. And again, once you see it, you can't unsee it. But then once you see it, you get to choose something different. And this is when I was trying to think of what I can do to help you visualize this a little bit more. I was thinking of a pickle jar. You cannot read the label from inside the jar. You can't see what type of pickles if you're surrounded by pickles and juice, right? That's not a flaw in you. That's just the position you're standing in. Another way is you can't see the forest through the trees. Like you can't see how vast the forest is when you're camping in a tent in the middle of in one spot. So the leaders who change their culture aren't the ones who try harder. They're the ones who finally get outside of the jar, step out of the forest long enough to read it, to see it, to understand what's really going on. And so I wanted to leave you with a signal check. So each week, for this episode, for this series, for this month, for this theme, if you will, I'm going to leave you a signal check because we need to start asking ourselves these questions. We need to start looking to see what we are sending and what we're receiving. It's like, what have you learned inadvertently this year from your stakeholders? And what have you taught this year without even realizing it? But here's what I want you to ask yourself today. What signal is my team receiving from me every single day? I want you to sit and think about that and just start to notice. We don't need to make massive changes yet, because really when we just sit and notice, that gives us the information that we need to make the adjustments. And if you've been sitting here and there and running your own list of, wait, do I do that? Good. That's exactly where this episode was supposed to take you. So when the signal changes, the behavior changes. So like I said, layer 3 is the behavior that's right next to layer 4, that's results. Layer 2 is the signal. It's not the other way around. Behaviors do not determine the signals. The signals determine the behaviors. So when the signal changes, the behavior changes. No restructuring, no hard conversations, no delegation training. If you're ready to see what becomes possible when this shifts, the Aligned Leadership Audit is where that conversation starts. Just you and I, again, just 45 minutes, no homework, well, unless you want homework, because I can give you homework. But let's just look at what's going on. Let's diagnose that gap and let's remove it. So link is in the show notes. And it's tammymurraycoaching.com/call. But notice this week, what signal is my team receiving from me every single day? By asking yourself that question, things will already start to shift. All right, with that, I will see you next week. Bye for now.